Hello and welcome to Magnify Matters, a podcast proudly produced by Catholic Education Sandhurst. Every great story has a beginning, and this one started with a single question. How can we do better for every student, in every classroom, every day? In this very first episode of Magnify Matters, we take you behind the scenes of Magnify Sandhurst, a bold, system-wide intervention designed to strengthen teacher practice, improve learner growth, and create more equitable outcomes for all students across the Sandhurst Diocese. Kate Fogarty and Tim Edwards join host Kimberley Furness to share how a simple conversation about literacy sparked a movement that now includes world-class partners, research-backed frameworks, and over 2,800 educators working together in solidarity. In this episode, we explore why a trip to Cambridge led to bold thinking back home, what happened when 60-plus literacy programs were reduced to one aligned approach, how the science of learning, structured literacy, and behavioural clarity came together, why equity, access, and teacher agency were at the centre of every decision, and how Magnify Sandhurst is setting a new standard for rural and regional education. Whether you're an educator, a parent, or someone curious about what's possible when schools work together with purpose, stay with us as we magnify what truly matters. Hello, Kate and Tim. Welcome to the launch of our episode of Magnify Matters.
Thanks. It's great to be here, Kimberley.
Thanks, Kimberley. Looking forward to it.
We have fast approached to the end of term one, and it was a big term for us because we launched Magnify Sandhurst across 51 schools.
It's absolutely bonkers to think that we've only been at this for a couple of months.
So obviously a lot's happened. Let's take a moment, reflect on the story so far. Now, every great story has a beginning, so I would love to know, where did the idea for Magnify Sandhurst start? Kate, was it after your appointment as Executive Director? Or Tim, had the seed been planted earlier?
Thanks, Kimberley. It's so exciting to begin to tell the story of where Magnify came from. I know there's a lot of people across our system who've heard this story, but there's a lot who haven't. We've had a lot of sessions with our principals and with the leaders in our schools, but we're very conscious that there's a lot of teachers and allied staff and families, parents, and even students, as well as just interested people who are curious about what we got up to and how we got here. So it's really wonderful to be here and to be able to be telling this story. Well, for me, the Magnify journey really started in the few months before I was appointed, and I was lucky enough in 2023 to have an opportunity to go to Cambridge University in the UK and undertake a course in their business school that was really looking at the rub between strategy and innovation. And at that point in time, I really wasn't thinking about trying out for a new job. But the advertisement came up actually while I was there in Cambridge, and that was probably fortuitous because as I was thinking about, have I got the skills, have I got the knowledge to step in and step on from being principal to a different role? Did I have that in me? But also what could I bring to the system that might be fresh or that might be what was timely for where the organisation was at? And that course really did shift my thinking around what organisations were capable of. And that was as much the learning we did in the course as it was the people who were there in the course. So there were people who were running major government agencies right around the world, huge infrastructure programs, huge transport projects or humanitarian programs. It was just a real privilege to learn from these very wonderful people who'd stepped into these extraordinary roles, and it was very inspirational. So by the time I came back and started the application, I realised, like every good person, you've got to know your data. So I jumped online and got on the My School website and was looking at the NAPLAN results and some of the other data that My School can provide. That was really all I had available to me at that time. And just, having been and worked in Sandhurst before and knowing what fabulous people there are here and what, really dedicated to their jobs and all wanting the best for their kids, leaders, teachers, everybody, and there being big and small schools and a bit of everything going on. Looking at that data, there was an element of heartbreak. I think that, in rural Australia, the literacy and numeracy data isn't what it is around the metropolitan areas, and that Sandhurst was no different. And I guess I really started wondering what interventions we could be thinking about that would really make a difference for the young people in our schools, and certainly, in the first instance, address that very basic literacy and numeracy learner growth issue, but also more broadly, what were the other bits and pieces that we could do to improve schools in Sandhurst. So with all of that in mind, obviously I ended up being appointed. And one of the first bits of data that came across my desk when I started was a study that the people in the office had engaged in just in the end of the year before, which was around how many literacy programs we had across Sandhurst. And there were at that time 52 schools, primary and secondary schools across Sandhurst, across the organisation. And it was something like there were 64 literacy programs that they had counted and in speaking with the schools been able to list. And some of those were the same programs under slightly different names or slightly differently nuanced. But, I mean, that was just bonkers to think there wasn't improvement in learner data in literacy. There were some little pockets of growth and goodness that we could point to. But by and large, these, whatever it was, 64 programs, 62, were not impacting in the way that they could. So once I'd got my head around, a few of the other parts of the job, I had a go at, I thought, well, let's get some smart people in a room. So we grabbed 4 of the principals and 4 other staff from the office and really just sat down to talk about literacy. What could we do? How could we do it differently? And Magnify grew from there. But that was the very start, Tim. I don't know if you remember it any differently. That's my early memories of it.
I think I can recall Kate being lucky enough to be invited to be part of the steering committee, and not long thereafter, or just before, it was certainly before our first meeting, the Grattan report dropped regarding our multi-school organisation, and we'd had some informal conversation regarding how we're going to step forward. We're aware of the reading wars more broadly and internationally, and how we're going to step forward in response to that. So the timing of the Grattan report on multi-school organisations was really telling, and I think formed and really took over a significant part of our early meetings as a steering committee.
Yeah, you're right. I had forgotten that. And that we were thinking about those as quite different things, I think, then. And we really certainly didn't have the name Magnify. All we were thinking about was, literacy. We really need to think about how can we support our schools to do better in that space. And then you're right, that multi-school organisation report dropped, and it was a bit revelatory to us, I think, around CSL had incorporated in 2021, and the schools had more or less been told, we're in the middle of COVID, just keep doing what you're doing, nothing's going to change. And I think the mindset of the office and the mindset of the schools was pretty much everyone continue to do your own thing, choose your own adventure, do the very best you can with what you've got. That report from Grattan really, I think, lifted our eyes to actually, when we operate as a system and we use the resources of a system, we probably could have more impact. We had some hunches around that. I don't think we really knew what we were even talking about, but we thought there was something in this.
And I think there were probably 2 parts to that, or more than. But certainly let's learn more around the reading guarantee that came out from Grattan as well. Let's learn more for ourselves and be guided by some of the great people that we had in the steering committee and beyond. So we certainly started exploring that. At the same time, we were thinking about this solidarity piece and what does it mean for all of us to do this together. Surely there are some smarter and better ways than having 60 plus different initiatives happening in 50 places.
Well, and I think the other part of that was just realising the inequity of that some of our really large schools had the resources to put in place very significant partnerships and programs, whereas our little schools, of which there are quite a few, just didn't have the resourcing, didn't have the money, didn't have the teaching staff to be able to free up people to do professional learning, and the inequality of that. And I don't know about you, Tim, it was keeping me awake at night, that the data wasn't tracking upward in a way. And, NAPLAN's a bald test, but that's the way it is. That's what we've got. It wasn't shifting in the way some other systems were shifting their data, and our schools were not on a level playing field to address that. And I think that they were some of those really early drivers. But even, as we talk about this, I think it's really funny to think back. We just thought we were talking about literacy. I know we said very early we wanted to use the expertise of people outside of the organisation, and we were lucky enough to get in a room with Pam Snow from La Trobe Uni, from the Solar Lab, pretty early on. And she was one of the first ones to really point to us around what was happening with literacy programs elsewhere and to point us in the direction of some other systems that we could speak to. And I think it was really through Pam that we opened up the conversation with Canberra-Goulburn Diocese, who were already doing some good things, and with Lismore Diocese. And I think you had more to do with that, Tim, than I did, but that blew our little minds really and opened a whole world of learning around what was possible.
Yeah, it certainly did. And the generosity of those good people and others, and, all of those that you've mentioned, really led us to deeper learning, and we went down some rabbit holes. We read endlessly and were shared into new and different spaces than we perhaps anticipated. And the overlay to the science of reading and the structured literacy approach was the science of learning. So, of course, then we started exploring, well, why would we do it in one area and not all areas? So that led to some different conversation. But again, back to Canberra-Goulburn and Lismore, we really learned so much, didn't we, about whole of system approach and the challenges that come with the bits and pieces approaches by comparison.
I can remember you guys coming back from one particular discussion and talking to us about some data that had come from one of the other dioceses around being able to point really specifically to schools that had gone in solidarity with a particular literacy program and those that had chosen a different way and were kind of finding on their own their way forward. And the data was stark, that the schools who had gone together and who were doing professional learning together, who had a common language, who were able to bounce off other schools as well as within their own with the same resources, really were, even in, the second and the third year, just showing hugely more student learner growth than other places, and were reporting greater staff satisfaction and greater staff comfort with those projects. I think that was hugely formative for us. And I can even remember this conversation where we were like, okay, we think we know what needs to happen at F to 2 in literacy. What about 3 to 6? And what about 7 to 12? And then that was where the whole thing kind of blew right open, and we were like, oh my God, this is much bigger than what we thought it was, which led to the conversations with OCA. And of course, we spoke with a number of different organisations and businesses and people who did structured literacy F to 2 in different ways. And we landed on Multilit because they offered the most comprehensive package, and they had all these other things we could put around it that we saw as valuable. But it really left us with these other big questions about, hang on, we've got F to 2, okay, what are we going to do about grade 3 to 6 in particular, and then 7 to 12? And as I say, that led us to OCA. And did you have the first conversation with Reid and the team at OCA, or how did that come about?
No, that was another member of our steering committee.
Right.
And really that was from their connection with, I think, someone at Max in terms of the Archdiocese work that they'd done around building out some of the early maths curriculum.
We weren't even talking about maths.
We weren't
we
at
were
that
still
point,
talking
no.
about literacy. Maths came on the back of that.
I think it led, as we explored, I can recall in one of those sessions, we explored different data sets that we identified, how do we really know? And I don't know if it was in one of the readings or one of the reports, but how do we really know if curriculum has been taught in line with its intention? And I think that's sort of what led us to saying, well, if we're doing this in one area, i.e. literacy or English curriculum, how are we going to observe that in other areas, and how do we really know? And that led us down the burrow of what is good curriculum design, and again, how do we know? So we kept going from one to the next in a good way, but the whiteboards were full.
The next conversation that really shifted us was with the team at Knowledge Society. We were speaking to them about some work they'd done in Canberra-Goulburn around sequencing the rollout of their structured literacy program and a few other pieces they'd put around that.
And well done to the crew at Catalyst. They've been so generous for all of the work that they've done. And I think we should shout out to all of those partners and those that received our cold calls at whatever hour of the day, wherever they were, whether or not it be interstate or overseas. Has been one of the most amazing reflections for me personally, people's willingness to jump in and help out. And sorry to interrupt you, Kate, but I just think that crew at Catalyst have been amazing and straight away said, hey, try this or ring them, as the people at Lismore did as well.
Yeah, and thank goodness they put us onto Knowledge Society, because that was a big step forward for us, because one of the things that they challenged us to think about was it's all very well and good to be thinking about implementing a new literacy and numeracy program, but if we weren't looking at the culture of the classroom and the way the students were able to access that learning, then we were probably not going to allow it to land with as much strength as it could have. And that's where we started learning about behaviour curriculum. And I think there was a bit in the media around that time. And I must admit, I was pretty sceptical about it all. It felt to me like, what have these people, how dare they talk to schools about the way that kids learn behaviour, and we're in Catholic ed. Our kids, we worry about pastoral care and the behaviour curriculum. It just didn't feel like it fit with who we were. But the more we got into those conversations and really came to understand that creating the situations where adults and students were confident that the classrooms were going to be calm and that there was predictability even in the way behaviour was managed and dealt with, then approaching that in the same way in terms of providing, really clear support and expectations for staff and students, as we were with literacy and numeracy, was probably going to allow the literacy and numeracy to land much more significantly.
And I think at the same time, Kate, we were doing our reading and learning and had some very clever minds in the space with us regarding the science of learning. And I know I touched on that before, but I think that conversation with Knowledge Society and Classroom Mastery as part of their work really hit us between the eyes to say, well, if we're talking around science of learning and cognitive load, we must consider extraneous load. And if a calmer classroom helps students focus on what matters most, surprise, surprise, they might learn better. Yeah. And if our teachers have calmer classrooms, it might, surprise, surprise, help them teach better. So I think that the timing of that was pretty significant for us, and some people might be listening saying, oh, duh, but it did help us pull that together in terms of fitting all of these threads together.
Yeah, you're right. And the other element of that was that notion of putting together a playbook for the teachers. Remember that way back in the day, where we'd seen all of these playbooks that different schools or school systems had rolled out that really went to the minutiature of science of learning largely, but, elements of what it is to be a good teacher and what the expectations might be on a staff at a particular school. Or we thought, across all of Sandhurst, we'll just put out a playbook and everybody will be fine with that. And of course, we had the realisation that with all of these other things going on, we were going to end up in this situation where there was a huge professional learning need for our staff, and that it was ridiculous to think that we could just drop a playbook into people's hands and even into our principals and our school leaders' hands and expect them to just roll it out and think, that they all had the skills and the knowledge and the confidence to do that. And so that really turned our eyes to, well, actually maybe there's another partner we need here who's going to help us with that. What we, really think of as coaching now, but how do we actually support our teachers and incidentally the other people who are in our classrooms, the allied staff, to know the best science of learning, to understand that and to be able to apply it with fidelity and be able to apply it with confidence in their classrooms. So 2 partners kind of came out of that, didn't they? It was Jared at Learning Made Easy Global, who'd done some work here in Sandhurst in the past, and a lot of people spoke very positively about, and he's very well known on the international scene as being able to really break down the science of learning into very easy, digestible and practical components for teachers. So we were really attracted to that. And then Step Lab, who just really can bring to great coherence what it is to be in the classroom and how to really help teachers get the best out of themselves in applying the science of learning to every element of their day.
And if you're listening to this, one of our Sandhurst teachers, all of these things are coming in some upcoming professional learning, but we clearly have the theory from Jared to the operational practice of the lessons with Ochre and Multilets products, and the Step Lab piece in the middle is really that capacity to and how to deliver the mechanics of the theory into the practice. So,
and I guess because there's more teachers than just literacy and numeracy teachers. Like all of our primary school teachers teach all the subjects, and then secondary schools, we haven't got to the rest of the curriculum yet. We're only really in numeracy. We're coming with literacy soon with English and science, but the rest of the curriculum, we didn't have anything in our hands to provide for those teachers. So the days with Jared, 3 full days of professional learning for our staff, such a valuable uptick for us all, whether we're working with students or just with other adults, in understanding how the brain works best, in creating brain-friendly schools, brain-friendly workplaces, brain-friendly meetings, brain-friendly anything and every interaction that we can think of. That only enhances the work that we all do, irrespective of what our role is in the school.
Yeah, and I'm really looking forward to the next part of that as well, as around the implementation. So how does that theory, how does the rubber hit the road? And the Step Lab platform provides really clear codified practices that help the implementation of that, based around good work of Rosenshine's principles and others. It's the best current research in practice in small steps that, like you say, Kate, is across all subject areas, not just English and maths.
So it sounds like you're starting to get a bit of a wish list happening now. So it started with literacy, adding to numeracy, finding those world-class partners as such. There's got to come a point where you're like, who's paying for this? So what type of budget did you have?
The short answer is no, we didn't have a budget, because we really did start out thinking we were just talking about literacy, and that this might have sounded like it happened really fast, but that whole process really happened probably over about 3 months, and we were talking with each of these partners, throughout that time. But you're right, there did come a time where we went, okay, this all sounds really well and good, and we had whiteboards going everywhere and timelines, and we were getting into nitty-gritty, and we had a date in mind that we wanted to launch everything, that we had a principal date. We meet with them every term for 1 full day, and we knew we had to say something there. We'd kind of promised it. We'd sort of dropped a few things that we were working on something. They knew we were thinking about something, but we kept it pretty tight, and we knew that finances was a big part of that. So eventually, while Tim and some of the others were working with the actual partners and trying to get them to, be thinking about what was the best way that they could put their offer together and that would be workable for us and wasn't going to blow our bank, behind the scenes we were looking at, is there a different way that we can structure things up financially? So when we became one company back in 21, ostensibly we have, an owner who's the bishop, who's the owner of the company. There's a board. Then there's we in the office who are the arms and legs of the board, and then the principals, obviously, and their school budgets. But really it's one big business. And the way we're funded in Catholic education is slightly different for the primaries and the secondary schools, so we needed to weigh that in. And there's some ways that money is managed across the whole system to help to try and balance that inequality that I spoke about earlier. There's some things that are some money that's taken off the top and distributed a bit differently based on school need. So we were able to think about using that money a little bit differently. And then there was other resources that we put aside as part of the school budgets for professional learning or resourcing for literacy or numeracy more broadly, and a few other bits and pieces that we just said, well, what about if we just do all pull that together and treat it a little bit differently? Might we be able to get close? Because we didn't want principals to have to hear this and then go, oh, heck, how am I going to pay for this? We wanted to be able to present them, this is how we've done it, and this is how your budget's going to look for next year. It's not going to change what you've got available to you in any dramatic way, but you're going to have access to all of this. We're going to just tie it all up with a bow. So we were really committed to that. And I must admit, there was some big upskilling for quite a few in the team to get everybody understanding how we could do that and what was reasonable and what wasn't. But because we were buying at bulk, if you like, too, with each of these partner organisations, we were able to negotiate prices that were really, really reasonable comparative to each, as if each school had gone and tried to line up a deal with them individually. So that was tremendously exciting exciting, and we were just really proud and pleased that the partners really came to the party with us on that. And, you know, like any good deal, when you go bulk, threw in a few extras here and there and allowed us to really present to the principals on that first day something pretty magical, really.
And Kate, I think to add to that, you touched on it right at the beginning of this, is that access and equity that front and centre for us in not just paying for it, was allowed to pay for it to allow anyone in any one of our schools access to the highest quality professional learning. And we make light of that, the partner throw in whatever the extra was, but front and centre for us in every one of those conversations was to say we want our people, not just some people in our schools, to grow and to learn. So what else have you got? What else could you include? We've seen this advertised. What about that? And that was a way for us to be able to leverage some of those conversations to allow greater access and better equity for all in Sandhurst.
And better fidelity too, because even in a big school that might have, you know, the finances to be able to engage with an entity, I'll just pick one of them, like multi-lit, and be able to use their resources off their own bats. More often than not, what they don't have is the money to then make sure that every teacher gets the professional learning with fidelity. Whereas, again, because we'd gone bulk, not only do we get all the resourcing across each of these 5 partnerships, but also we're able to ensure that every single teacher who needed to got the professional learning up front. And also there are mechanisms built in as new staff come into our schools that learning will continue in ways that is going to work for them as well. So very often when schools start programs, they start out with good intent, but the fidelity becomes an issue because not enough people are trained, or not enough people have time release, or not enough people have the confidence to be able to rearrange the timetable or whatever it might be. We were hoping, and we worked really hard to try and make sure that all of those barriers to a successful implementation, a successful launch, were taken off the table. So, you know, full credit to our staff, all 2,800 across the diocese, who've all been through considerable professional learning across the back half of 2024 and this first part of 2025, because we were able to do it and because the partners were able to create opportunities for us to do it on a timeline that was manageable for our schools.
And I think when you speak about how many teachers you've upskilled in, 51 schools, we're talking regional and rural as well. When you talk about that gap up the top to metropolitan, do you ever stop and pause? I know it's only term 1, but stop and pause and go, wow, we are making a real tangible effort to close that gap.
Kimberley, every now and then I think we all have these little moments of, oh my goodness, but it is early days. And I think what we are doing is putting the right tools in the right places in the best way we can. And to the best of our knowledge, there's nowhere else in the world, let alone here in Australia, who've put in place such a comprehensive program. Magnify Sandhurst was very deliberately designed to be comprehensive in the end, once we got our head around the fact that we weren't just talking about literacy. And we know what's coming next. We've said to our schools, we know wellbeing. We haven't looked at a wellbeing program that we would roll out across everyone. And, we know there's other areas of the curriculum people are starting to ask, can we get in on this? And there'll be a million other things out there. But I think we've created the conditions, and that I feel really proud about that. I hope our people feel really proud about that too. I know it's been a lot of work and it's been a big term 1, and there's a lot of very tired people out there, ending term 1, and I hope everyone has a great break so term 2 really does get off to a good start. But it still feels a bit surreal to me. Tim, how do you?
Yeah, I think there are my two biggest reflections in that space. One of the principals from the launch on the 29th of August were on board. There was an appetite for it in Sandhurst. There was acceptance that there were 60-plus strategies in literacy that wasn't okay, and there was had to be a better way to do it, had to be better ways for people to be able to collaborate and support. And from that day, the principals and their leaders in their school and their staff in the schools have been absolutely brilliant at jumping on it, giving it a go. It's caused significant disruption for everyone in what they had as their normal, and their capacity to jump on and our leaders' capacity to lead that has been exceptional. The second part is we were lucky enough to step out of a partners meeting. So once a term we pull together our partners, and it's that moment, that sort of check yourself moment where you sit and go, goodness, we've got some good people here with us, and they are the leaders in their field, wherever that be across the globe. And finding a time frame is always challenging for that meeting. But to sit and to hear them reflect on their journey and their partnership and their commitment to the partnership is really significant. And I think, as Kate said, make sure that the tools are in the right hands.
So you mentioned that there is change for them. What was their normal? They now have a new normal. What does their new normal look like then?
I think it's about a willingness to continue to engage in current research and to be guided by the research that is leading our partner organisations. And the depth of that research is considerable, and the evidence of the impact that we have right here, right now is the most recent. And we're thrilled to be able to have that close connect with that theory into practice. So I think their new normal, and we've seen great levels of that, a willingness to engage with and to learn about and to become, we are creatures of habit, but to be able to roll into some routines that we know are really, really well resourced and well backed, and to trust those resources and to know that this level of adjustment is significant for them right now, but to have a level of trust that what we're doing is going to have an impact on our kids in Sandhurst.
I think for a lot of us too, and I include myself in this, it's really rubbed up against who we are as teachers and educators and people involved in schools in a disquietening way. And the reason why I say that is the whole mantra, you hear it all over the place, and we certainly used it as part of this too, the know better, do better. There's a moral imperative with know better, do better around, the what is it that keeps you up at night. If you learn something that you've been doing isn't the best way that young people can learn, there is a moral imperative to adopt whatever that new way is. And in education, we've all done a lot of things that were bright and shiny, programs that someone went to a conference or a meeting or whatever, and it looked good, but perhaps didn't have evidence behind it. And we've all I've been guilty of that in the past. I'm sure most of the teachers listening to this can all point to things they've done in their careers, and leaders as well, decisions they've made about various programs or resources or whatever it might be that you think in retrospect, might not have really tested the veracity of that at the time. But this, for me, is not the first time, but certainly one of the most major times of going into something going, okay, I've learnt new things and I need to apply them, and we can apply them at scale. And there's a lot of our people in conversations about this at the moment. I hear a lot of people say, I feel like, why did I teach that class that way? Or back in 1980 whatever or 1990 whatever, I did this thing and now I can see that was really crazy. But we can only do what we can with what's in front of us. So I think that, if on that kind of deep heart level, the disquietingness of this is present for a lot of us. And yet, as I move around the diocese and I'm talking to people, I just keep hearing people say there's really good energy. Yes, it's hard. Yes, I'm doing a lot of intellectual preparation for my class or for the next conversation or the professional learning or whatever it is. But there is a genuine sense of comfort in that and warmth around that too, because it is so evidence-based. And I think the other thing we've tried to be really upfront with people and careful about saying is we don't expect perfection straight up. In fact, we've said many times, and we'll probably be saying it for a long time, not to let the perfect be the enemy of the good. These programs are good and perfection will come. And for a lot of our staff have done that really quickly, have got into the structured nature of the lessons or whatever it might be really fast, or the behaviour curriculum bits and pieces really fast. For others, we know change takes time, and, the average change personally, the research says, is 66 days. For us in schools, that's, a term and a half, really. So we're not even there yet at that point, and that's just the average. So some people are going to take longer, some are already there and fine with it all, and that's just the reality bringing in any change project, let alone this one. So some of our people obviously have been through the learner dip. They've become unsure about what they're doing. They're rebuilding those skills and getting back on track. So all of that, we're not expecting perfection. We will in time, because we're wonderful people and we want the best, and we know our people are capable of the best, but we are very conscious that there's a lot going on, particularly for our primary school staff. Secondaries will come.
Further to Kate's comments there regarding where we are at as we've adjusted to a new normal that we don't know is normal yet, has been an acceptance that we're all learning. And it doesn't matter if it was Kate in a conversation with someone from the UK or the Grattan Institute to the grade 2 teacher. I think congratulations go broadly around a level of vulnerability that sits with people as we adjust. We are human, and how we monitor and evaluate ourselves and the support that we get is really important. And, I think that there's been a lot of change that we've tried as best we can to nuance and support and step out. No doubt there'll be different views around that, yet it's always been an open dialogue between schools and the office and schools and their staff in terms of how people are going, how do people look after each other, and their level of vulnerability and acceptance for change is a natural thing. And I think by and large people have managed it particularly well.
Well, I think the great stories we hear out of schools every day, around this child who I thought was at this level and now I'm finding they're at this level, or, from our speech pathologists who are called out to visit a school and then, a few weeks later when they get there are told, actually, you know what, this curriculum's created a way of being that suits this child and their learning, and we don't think we need an assessment anymore. All of those kinds of stories, or the other kind of delightful ones I love hearing. We hear plenty from the teachers and in the conversations that are happening across schools and within schools around what's happening. But the gorgeous stories of kids who have cousins on the other side of the system, who live in a town 4 towns over or whatever, and are talking about the book they're reading in common, or the end of day practice, or whatever it might be, that, is just bringing them a little bit of joy as they realise we're all in this together, and, and we can talk about the same book, or we can, chat about this element of what's happening at school. All of that, that sense of the collective and ourselves as an ecosystem who are working together for something really important. We want our young people to have the best opportunity. We want our schools to be level playing fields where every child in every school on every day and every teacher is resourced to do their very best learning. We mean it when we say that, and we're hearing stories of the joy that this is bringing, as well as Tim says, that it's been a lot of work. And, a shout out for me in particular, coming out of secondary education and just looking at the F2 teachers and just what they have done, so many of them in picking up 2 programs, or 3 if you count Source of Life as well, our religious education curriculum, and just really, adjusting what they're doing in quite a dramatic way. I'm just in awe of those people, and I just adore going into those classes. It's a mystery to me what those people do with little people in schools. And also hearing the great stories out of the secondary schools of the sense from a lot of teachers and even from the kids that things feel calmer and things feel more ordered. And not that our schools were out of control by any stretch, they weren't, but they, just to bring that next level of change. I was with the student leaders a couple of weeks ago at the gathering of all the Year 12 student leaders across the schools, and to hear those kids talk about what they were noticing in their peers, whether it's 7, 8s, 9s or their Year 11 and 12 peers, as they went through those first 6 or 8 weeks of the year and got used to those routines and, the grumblings and things that happened, but then this sense of, actually, you know what, this is making a difference to what's happening in my classroom, and it's a positive difference. All of that, hearing that come out of the kids' mouths is just fantastic.
And I know that our following episodes will step into different information from the partners regarding that. As a parent, I think there's the natural questions. What is this going to look like for my young person? And I think there's great benefit in listening into future episodes, but also to know that the norm should be that kids can access what matters most, and that's capacity to be able to learn and to be able to be taught, because we know that if we have novice learners, they need to be taught information. So to be able to provide opportunity for that to occur, parents, rest assured, more to follow in future episodes, but rest assured your kids are in good hands, and this is research-based best practice, and we look forward to looking after your kids.
Now, when you mention research at the top, we mentioned the Grattan Institute report. I suppose the question is now, with Magnify rolling out, how do you measure success and when does that start?
It's a good question, Kimberley. It's something we thought deeply about right back from the very start. We've got the big data sets, NAPLAN, ASA, even the Dibbles one that everybody's just completed. We've got those. But we also have access now, being one system, to right down to what's happening in every classroom. So we have both the quantitative and the qualitative information coming through. And we won't see the big data shift for a few years. If we do, fantastic. We'll be jumping up and down if it happens before then. But the really big data, your NAPLANs and those sorts of ones, will take a while before we see any shift. And so we all just have to be patient around that. But we know teachers already are seeing shift in their classrooms and are able to measure that. And so we're capturing that at a diocesan level as well, at our system level, so we can really demonstrate the efficacy of what's happening. And a lot of our schools were doing that already. We've just really simplified that in the best way that we can, so that there's common data coming through from every single school. So we're comparing apples and apples, and whether you're in a composite F2 class, or you've got a 3-4, or you've got a straight 4 or a 7 or whatever it is, that we have data that's actually able to demonstrate to you, to our families, to anyone and everyone who cares to look, just what a fabulous job our teachers are doing with first-class resources in their schools day in, day out.
I heard someone yesterday say the more data you collect, the more mature the insights. And I think that speaks volumes to the work that we hope to do through having more regular data capture points that aren't overly cumbersome on our staff, and well done to those that have been able to meet that first phase of assessment. But we owe that to our kids and our families to ensure that we do monitor, and as a system we monitor and show that growth in our learners, which gathering more data is going to enable us to have a more accurate insight into that.
Can you see other systems taking this on? Like seeing what the great work you're doing and going, I think we need to do something like this.
Certainly feels like there's a lot of eyes on us at the moment, and all those phone calls we made early on are certainly coming back at us in different ways, which is really exciting, and it's great to be able to share what we're up to. I think what we've done that's different is the way that we've taken 5 core programs and staged them out over time. And there's, we were able to do that on the back of what we learnt from other systems. So even if another system didn't pick up Magnify, I wouldn't really expect them to, but if they came to us, as they are starting to do, around our learnings and what we can share about what's worked, that's really our contribution back to the big education world. And, that's just happening at our level at the moment, but I don't think it's too far away that our people in the schools are going to start hearing all of that if they're not already as well. Certainly, teachers in other systems and also other people who work elsewhere, just looking in at what we're doing. And of course, we're not stupid. One of our goals here is we want Sandhurst to be the number one employer of teachers in our part of the world. And we want people to feel like, teachers and allied staff, we want to work with them because what they're doing is not just impactful, but it's really satisfying. And it really, there's a great culture of people who are really committed and have the tools to do what they need to do. So, I think, we'll talk with anyone who wants to talk with us about what we're doing and what we're learning, and open that up for our people to share those stories too. And that's part of what this podcast is about as well, because we're just so proud of our people and we're so proud of what's happened here in Sandhurst. And already, just one term in, the place feels different. We're talking about teaching and learning with a common language, with a common understanding of what our goals are together, and our people have the tools to be able to really learn from each other and to take forward what we've put in as a base into something that even we couldn't have hoped for and anticipated.
And just to pick up on that, I think that reinforces that appetite that I mentioned earlier. Recently, a principal said to me again, this is someone that had been in the diocese for more than 20 years. They said, it's just so refreshing to have learning and teaching front and centre again, as it should be and should always be. But I think that being reinforced and reflected back to us is a great thing. We're not kidding ourselves though. It's it's the first quarter, and we might have kicked one goal, but we might have the wind at our back as well. So we are not pretending. We need some more runs on the board.
Just to mix your metaphors completely.
Just to mix them right up. We're not kidding ourselves. We need to kick a few more goals before we're going to overly spruik.
Now, throughout the podcast series, we are asking a question at the end that wraps us up, and it's what matters most in this conversation. So, Tim, I'll ask you first, what matters most from our conversation today?
There was a University of New South Wales, I think, report in 2017 or 2018 that I accessed again recently before a learning leaders session in Shepparton. And they outlined the disadvantage in terms of educational outcomes for students in rural and regional areas, including Victoria. And that's not okay. And it outlined that improved outcomes to the average of the regional counterparts would increase productivity by $3.2 billion annually. And that was before any inflation gone crazy. It just strikes me that we owe it to every one of our students and every one of our families in every part of Sandhurst that would classify as regional and rural, and that's nearly all, that we deserve at least the same as kids that grow up in any other city centre.
Yeah, our postcode shouldn't be a barrier, especially when it comes to things like education and health. What about you, Kate? What matters most from our conversation?
I think for me, I'm still really grappling with this uncomfortable space of know better, do better. And for a long time, we've allowed a choose your own adventure approach across schools and within schools. And that's great when everybody has the time and the energy to be across all of the research and then the resources to apply it with fidelity. And that is not the case in our schools. Our teachers are time poor. Our resourcing is tighter than ever. And the moral imperative to do something together and what that has opened up for us, for me, is what has mattered in this, that we've approached what it is to be a school system, an ecosystem of schools in a very different way. And we've put into the hands of the people who matter most, the teachers and the other adults in our classrooms, the best resources that we possibly can. And we've provided them with the best professional learning that we possibly can. And we're committed in an ongoing way to making sure those programs land with fidelity so that our young people benefit from the smartest people in the world who have built these amazing programs. And that just makes me incredibly proud and incredibly hopeful. And I'm pretty confident that over the coming years we're going to know more and do even better as we continue these conversations within the diocese and learn from each other, but also looking outside to the experts who have the time and the expertise and the energy to go even deeper than we can in our busy lives where we're responding to the kids in front of us. And that will only continue to increase what we can do here in Sandhurst. And there's no reason why we can't be a world-class system where student learner growth is not just as good as what's happening elsewhere in Australia, but better than it. We have the staff, we have the resources, we have the energy to do it. And to me, the fact that we keep trying to be that is what matters most.
Well, thank you both for the insights into Magnify Sandhurst. Look forward to hearing more soon. That's it for this episode of Magnify Matters. Make sure to follow the show and share it with someone who cares about great teaching and learning. You can also leave a review or connect with us online at Catholic Education Sandhurst. Until next time, stay with us as we magnify what truly matters.